Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Elementary. A great episode. Lots of wonderful twists and turns in this episode, but let's just kind of jump into it and kind of break everything down bit by bit. First of all, we had this dude named Leland Frisk being the victim in this episode. He was poisoned by cyanide when he was drinking wine, but it was like, oh, he's a relocation expert, but then it turns out, oh no, he's not just some relocation expert. It's like, oh, he blackmails people. Well, not technically, because in actuality, he's actually a hitman who kept files to make sure that his clients never betrayed him, because he'd have the insurance policies to take them down as well. It's like, okay, so then this is all connected to figuring out who are all these people, like, because if they can find out whose case files are missing, they could be like, okay, so this person's the one that killed Leland. So to figure this all out, they end up finding out, they went to his assistant Sherry, and then it's like, oh, here's this dude Medina, his files are the only ones missing. And it turns out this Medina dude's kind of a douchebag, because it seems like he's basically based on that real life dude who basically, what was the medication? I forgot what it was. There's a dude in real life who did that whole situation that Medina's situation is based on. In this, he took a medicine, many different medicines, and jacked up the prices of them drastically. In this particular episode, we're focusing on the cystic fibrosis medicine. But like I said, there was a dude that did it in real life. I forgot what it was. So it's kind of obviously like a storytelling of that. So, but they can't get Medina for Leland's murder. So they're trying to go back. Okay, so we'll find out the murder that Leland hired Medina for. And then in a long roundabout way, they end up finding out, oh wait, he never hired Leland. That the fact of the matter is, Sherry was the one that picked up, like, all this was about framing Medina. So I was like, wait a minute. So Leland actually killed himself, because this is all a long-winded way to get the FBI involved, because basically it turns out that Sherry and Leland had a son named Hayden who was suffering from cystic fibrosis himself. And they wanted to, but like Leland looked into this whole situation. He found out that Medina had killed a dude named, or at least hired someone to kill a dude named Peter, who was the one kind of trying to help with this cheaper option for, he's the one that originally came up with like the option for this medication, but then Medina killed him, took the whole situation and jacked up the prices. So Leland went all about this in a roundabout way, because he also got contacted by the FBI, who was looking into like his files and stuff, because they were looking into cases that he was connected to. And he thought of this as an opportunity to get everyone involved. He even made the incubus, that weapon that ends up, which is a pretty brutal ass weapon, where it basically sucks the oxygen out of your lungs. And it's like, holy crap. He went through all of that just to point the finger at Medina. Did not expect that. That really was trippy. And it's kind of interesting too, because it's like, it leads to a conversation between Joan as well as Sherlock, because it's like, man, he was kind of a terrible person, Leland in particular, because it's like, yeah, he killed a lot of people. So it's like, was this a selfless act or kind of still a selfish act? Because on the selfless side of things, it's like, oh, you help kids like who are in the same situation. Not just kids, but, kids in particular, but people in general who are in that situation with cystic fibrosis. But Joan's like, well, yeah, but more so than anything, he was most likely more concerned about his own kids. So was it really a selfless act? It's like, well, he's a man who's lived most of his life as a hitman. So it's like, yeah, he's always going to look over his shoulder. Like, the past will never be forgotten. He has files on everything, so it's not like he could ever forget any person he ever killed. But, maybe he thought, with this life, this terrible life he did, like maybe he can do some good with it. So that's what this is all about. That kind of blew my mind, that's what, like I said, it was just a twist. Like, it turned out he's a hitman. Then it turns out he's the hitman that killed himself to take down some terrible dude. Which is, I think that speaks volumes of how much of a douchebag you kind of are when a hitman kills himself to frame you for his murder, just so they can find out how much of a piece of crap you are to get you arrested. So, because even the board on Medina's company didn't like what he was doing, but he was the CEO, so they couldn't do much about it. But it's like, hey, if he gets taken out of the picture, is what Leland ended up finding out. It's like, yo, because easily Leland could have just killed him, but actually it wouldn't have been easy because of his situation, because of all the death threats and stuff like that. He's gotten beefed up security, and even someone as skilled and as long-running history as being a hitman couldn't find a way to take Medina out. So this was his only other option, which is it speaks volumes, because it's like, oh, like I say, if you go down the selfless route, because it's like, even the selfless or selfish route, it's like, oh man, he did this on the selfish side, it's like, oh, he did it for his son, so that's kind of neat. But at the same time, it's also like, oh yeah, like, but maybe, he did it for the other people and in the same circumstances as well. Then it's like, it's like Sherlock says at the end, hitman with a heart of gold or not. It's like, still some good came about it anyway. But like I said, that just speaks volumes. It's like, you're that much of a piece of crap that everyone, even the people on the board of your company hate you. It's like, man, that's crazy. And they kind of do a similar thing to kind of screw him over, because Sherlock suggests they kind of put a hit out on Medina by letting it be known to, because obviously the hitman who Medina hired most likely does the same thing that Leland did and kept files on everyone ready to take anyone down who might try and take him down. So what they ended up doing was spreading out, hey, hitman, whoever you were, we let the word out that Medina's trying to talk about you. He tries to come and kill Medina, but the cops are there to capture him. It's like, oh, we weren't too worried because you had your beat up security too. It's like, that's still a gamble, but hey, I guess in the end it was like, I guess you're willing to take those chances. But now his hitman that he hired, Tad, is willing to turn on him. Now he gets arrested, and so that means the board situation is happening the way it is, and the drug's eventually going to get lowered. So crazy twist of an episode, but I guess you can look at the silver lining, like, oh yeah, there was some good that came about it. I mean, one less hitman out there, but it's like, oh, he tried to do some good in the end. So it's like, kind of leaves you very conflicted, because I mean, in no shape or form does it erase what he done. You did terrible shit. You done terrible shit, but it's like, yeah, you try to, I don't know, maybe you could make the argument it's like you're trying to balance the scales. It's like, maybe he wasn't trying to balance the scale, just trying to throw a little good out there before. So it's like, you can take that with grain, take it as you will. So it's just kind of an interesting, it's a twisty episode. That was just so good. And then on the other side of the episode, we had the whole Joan situation with her lawyer, Gary, who, man, oh man, is he a piece. Well, first of all, let's talk about the beginning of the episode where it's like Sherlock is like, oh yeah, I used this dollhouse for solving cases and, checking, using it to depict murders and stuff like that. But I've cleaned it out because it's like, oh, we leave it here during the home visit. And it's like, oh man, this is kind of speaks volumes about the presentation of the house and stuff like that. It's like, oh, obviously we get rid of the bear traps and even the rack with the locks on it and stuff like that. Because I mean, for one, the child could pull it down on themselves and stuff like that. But also at the same time, it's like any child of ours, we wouldn't really need any basic locks. We need some more elaborate stuff, because any child raised in this house would obviously know how to pick locks. And I'm like, that's so adorable that he's thinking so ahead. And you can even tell Joan's kind of like, wow, okay, surprised by his enthusiasm, because he's actually super excited about all of it. It's like, that's super adorable. But it turns out her lawyer Gary's kind of a piece of crap. He didn't kind of keep up with stuff, because for one, Joan ended up the people who were supposed, the social worker who was supposed to come visit the place, check it out, talk to them a little bit, didn't show up, because it turns out Joan got the date wrong for the appointment, as well as missed this parenting class she was supposed to go to. So in her mind, it's like, oh, obviously you don't care because you missed these two things. But it's like, no, her lawyer Gary messed up on both parts. He didn't bother checking in with her. And the douchebag has the audacity, oh, we'll just have to start fresh. And she's like, no. The fact of the matter is, he's like, well, if you had such doubts in me, if you trusted in me, if you didn't really trust my judgment, you should have went and talked to them yourselves. Kind of went around about. I was like, you're such a piece of shit. What are you doing? What? That's such an asshole response, because it's like, and she even says it herself, it's like, she trusts you. That's the whole point of having you to be her representative. You're supposed to have her best interest at heart in this situation. And you say a dick thing like that. It's like, screw you, Gary. I was like, oh my God, you suck so much. And he's like, okay, well, the fact of the matter is, we can start fresh from here. It's kind of like being like, oh, it's not just on me. I mean, it's honestly your fault. It's like, how can you be such an asshole, Gary? Oh my God, you suck so much, Gary. But then he's like, oh, come on, we can start fresh. I mean, she's like, I'm not trying to sue you or anything, is what he's gone, I guess, what he's potentially worried about. But it's like, I'm not trying to sue you. All I want you to do is admit your fault, and then we can be good. And then, let them know that it was on your fault side of things, not mine, that I was only following your lead. And it's just kind of like, he's like, yo, Joan, you've been wanting a kid for a while, so what's a few months more? Because basically it would start the process all over again. But it's like, dude, you just don't do that. Especially to someone like Joan. Don't do that. Don't be a dick. that I legitimately, it's one of those moments you kind of get, like, you're like, what? You get so invested, you're like, what? That is such a dick thing to do. I cannot stress that enough. And Sherlock found out about it because she ended up talking about it. Because, like, why didn't you tell me? He's like, so, okay, obviously we know how to handle this. She's like, the reason why I didn't tell you because of that same reason. I knew you'd go nuclear on the guy. And it's like, yeah, Sherlock's very protective, especially when it comes to you, especially considering the circumstances as well. So for her, it's like, and she's very kind about it too. Who Gary doesn't deserve that kindness, but it's like, yeah, because if she took down Gary the way they would probably handle this situation, it would hurt all the other people that he's helping with all his other clients, and she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want them to be collateral damage just because she's trying to get what she wants. She doesn't want to hurt other people. Just do it. And it's like, you're a good person, Joan. You are a good person thinking about other people, unlike Gary. But then later on, Sherlock, I thought it was kind of an interesting conversation because Sherlock was kind of like, the fact is that, like, it kind of feels like you didn't trust me to follow your lead, which she's like, no, it's not even like that. She's like, the fact of the matter is, I don't want to pressure you into co-parenting because I feel like you're all excited and stuff like this because you feel like, no, the pressure that you would need to help me. And it's like, I'm willing to handle this by myself. She's like, things are going to change for me. And if things change too much for you, I might not do it because I wouldn't want things to change too much for you. Like, because Sherlock has his way, his system, his way of handling things. Like, his life is the way it is. And she didn't want to change things too much for him. And so that would make her reluctant to do it, but she'd be willing to do it anyway, But then Sherlock was like, even if it means not getting involved, I will, if it means I will do whatever you say, like, even if you don't want me to get involved. But he still gets involved because he invites over King Wilhelm of Bohemia, which is interesting. King Without a Kingdom. I like that title, King Without a Kingdom. Essentially, Moreland helped him maintain his title and wealth, even though, like, Bohemia doesn't exist anymore. But then it turns out, and this was some interesting stuff, like, and I kind of just like, all right, I kind of let that slip my mind that is a thing where it's like, oh yeah, like, you can adopt anyone at any age. And it's like, all right, that's come across, I've seen that in other TV shows and stuff before too, so obviously that must be like a thing, but. Prince Havel was adopted 18 people. Basically, by adopting those 18 people, he's giving them the title. And obviously, these people are paying to be adopted so that basically they can get within certain social circles and stuff like that. That's what this whole thing ends up being about. And the lawyer representing Prince Havel and making these adoptions and stuff like that happen is Gary. And it's like, oh man, yes, you're even more of a slime ball, Gary. And I love, because Prince Wilhelm had no idea about what adoptions and stuff like that was about, the whole way it worked, until Sherlock explained it to him. And he's like, the fact of the matter is, I've always been envious of Moreland and you guys' situation. It's like, yeah, he admits, like, yeah, I know it probably wasn't easy growing up under those circumstances, but you guys, you and your brother are smart. But the fact of it, he's like, my son is an idiot. Because he's like, you guys aren't idiots. My son, on the other hand, is an idiot. And it's just kind of like, wow. So he's willing to help out with the situation, but Sherlock is like, hey, but we leave it up to Joan how we handle the situation. And Joan confronts Gary about it because the king is willing to be like, yeah, I'm ready to disown my son, which Joan's kind of like, yeah, he kind of feels like he was ready to do that anyway, especially the way he just talks about my son's an idiot. Like, it's just the blatant disregard like that, which is kind of like, yeah, the way he's doing stuff like that is kind of bringing shame upon the name. Because it also turns out that technically those titles aren't validated anyway, because the king has to be the one to sanction them, but he had no idea this was all happening behind his back. So obviously he didn't give his consent and sanction to these titles being passed around. So it's either like the king disowns his son and basically undoes all of that, or he keeps his son but then kind of removes those titles so those people come back and they sue Prince Havel, and you kind of get caught up in it too. So basically, Joan got what she wanted. Gary fixed everything, and then they cut ties with the relationship. It's just like, for one, that's what you get for bumping. Like, are you an idiot? Like, you're lucky, like Joan isn't an evil person or something. Like, she could have destroyed you easily. Like, obviously, the way her and Sherlock could have handled this, but it's like, she tried to go about it a very civil way. Obviously, Sherlock gave her a different option that wasn't completely nuclear. It was kind of a more scalpel option, I guess you could call it. So, but I love the ending where Sherlock is like, it's not like I'm feeling pressured to do this. The fact of the matter is, I'm here, like we're partners. Hell, you're my friend, so obviously I'm gonna do whatever it takes, being, a father figure in this child's life, because it's like, because this is important to you, obviously it is important to me. And the fact of the matter is, I don't want you to think that I'm feeling pressured, because I would do this because I would do anything for you. I'd lay down my life for you. Same thing for this child, and it's like, oh, that's so sweet. And she's kind of like, okay, so what would the child call you? He's like, he hadn't really thought about it. And she's like, how about Uncle Sherlock? He's like, I've been called worse. It's like, or it could just call me detective. And she's like, my child is not going to call you detective. He's like, fine, Uncle Detective. And it's like, dude, I love their situation. It's such a cute and adorable thing. And it's just, I'm loving that storyline, because I thought of them like parenting and stuff like that. It does make you wonder, it's like, oh man, how would that shift, I mean, it never crossed my mind to think about. I wonder, did Kitty in any shape or form kind of change that? I mean, obviously conversations, the whole thing kind of got sparked because of the whole situation with her therapist and conversations with her sister Lynn and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like, because you also see the Kitty situation where it's like, oh yeah, she had this life and then she kind of had a kid. So it makes you wonder if that changed. I mean, she never references it, but I'm wondering, does that kind of influences Joan's thoughts in any shape or form? I mean, the question I'm always curious about too is like, what about Sherlock? Did he ever have any aspirations of ever having a kid himself? Like, maybe he never really gave it too much thought. I don't remember if he ever, I mean, sure, like in the beginning, Jonah talked about why she really didn't say too much about Sherlock because of his stances on it and stuff like that. I think it was like, having kids, adopting kids is a different thing, but also because it's different because it's Joan adopting. So that makes a difference as well in his mind. But I'm wondering, is it like, I don't remember if he ever talked about it earlier season, specifically him wanting to have kids. He probably has. I'm not recalling. But I'm curious, like, is this kind of like not just Joan's chance to be a parent, but also his as well? So I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's just very interesting and just lovable circumstances. And I think it's just so good. Like overall, just like that side of things plus the main plot. This was a great episode. So it's a lot of, like I said, twists and turns and a lot of fun. So I'm very interested to see what goes down in the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.